Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the entertainment headquarters, and welcome to the newest of my segment Into the Darkness, which is all about horror, blood, guts, ghosts, ghouls, murderers, madmen, you name it. And joining me is another fellow YouTuber who is a huge fan of this particular franchise that we're about to talk about. He's supported this franchise. He's done a lot of the Kickstarter projects for the independent films within this franchise. It is my good friend Anthony Jordan from Anthony Jordan Movies and Gaming. Welcome to the channel.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the introductory segment for Into Darkness.
It's more than welcome, and like I say, I want to try and get different YouTubers on to help promote their channel as well as talk about topics I enjoy. And like I say, me Into the Darkness segment is all about horror. Like I have different segments for different genres within the world of entertainment, and this is all about horror. And the particular franchise that I did want to talk about today is, I know, like I said before, you're a huge fan of it, and it is, of course, Friday the 13th. So, tell me, Anthony, how you were introduced to Friday the 13th.
It's something we all knew about as kids, and whenever there was the late movie on, we would stay up when we shouldn't and watch it. There was the NES game, and when I got older, I found out from my mom the first film, because I'm originally from New Jersey. I live in North Carolina now, but the original film was filmed in New Jersey, and that's actually technically where they're set. So it kind of made Jason kind of this hometown hero and just made it seem a little cooler to me.
Yeah, and like you see, within the world of horror, there's so many different icons of horror. Like you've mentioned, we've got Jason Voorhees, we've got Michael Myers, we've got Ghostface, Freddy Krueger, and they all belong to a particular place. And it kind of, wherever the basically have done the killing spree, is basically to put that area on the map. And like you say, New Jersey for uh, Jason Voorhees. But we'll get into it a little bit and talk a little bit about the franchise. So I'll just talk a little bit of what I've read up here for Friday the 13th, because obviously the reason I wanted to do a franchise discussion on this is because it's an iconic franchise within the genre of horror, and there's many franchises out there, but Jason has always been one that's stuck around. But it's a one that I think, is, as of late, hasn't had the attention put on it. Scream and Halloween seem to have had a bit of a resurgence, and so is Child's Play as well. But this is what I've read. So Friday the 13th is an American horror franchise that comprises 12 slasher films, a television series, novels, comic books, video games, and tie-in merchandise. The franchise mainly focuses on the fictional character Jason Voorhees, who was thought to have drowned as a boy at Camp Crystal Lake due to the negligence of the camp staff. Decades later, the lake is rumoured to be cursed and is the setting of the series of mass murders. Jason is featured in all of the films as either the killer or the motivations for the killings. The original film, created to cash in on the success of Halloween in 1978, was written by Victor Miller and was produced and directed by Sean C. Cunningham. The films have grossed over 468 million at the box office worldwide. So that's just a little bit that I've read up about, obviously, Friday the 13th, what I know of. My first connection to the franchise was I was probably about 11 or 12. I know my brother had collected a few of the NECA figures. He used to collect all of the Movie Maniac series, and his favourite was Jason. And I do remember a long time ago, he had some friends over, and yep, there we go. Jason's right there. I remember when I was a kid, he had some friends over, and it was when we had where we lived. There was a video store because we had the video players then, VHS, and there was a place called Zodiac Videos, and I think he turned 18 and he wanted like a get together with his friends, and I remember that they wanted to watch some horror films, so that all of his friends got their parents to rent a horror film to bring to our house, and Graham chose Friday the 13th. And I remember sneaking in the room with his mates and watching it for the very first time. So that was my connection and my first introduction to Friday the 13th. So what is it about this particular franchise, Anthony, that you enjoy so much?
Well, for one, I just find the character of Jason fascinating because, like, you have Freddy, who was just always this psychopath,
Mm-hmm.
Michael Myers, who was born to be the incarnation of evil. But with Jason, we have the villain who was at one time the innocent victim who
Mm-hmm.
drowned because of negligence. And I
Mm-hmm.
find the setting really appealing too. If I could, I would want to live in an area like that. So it just
Mm-hmm.
kind of strikes me on some base levels. And when you have some really fun slasher films to combine with those features, it's just right up my alley.
Yeah. Because the majority of horror films, like you see with the Michael Myers character, they're always set in a big city or a small suburban town. But with obviously Friday the 13th, it's set like in the country area, and it's set within like a campground, like a holiday campground. So the setting is different to what we're used to seeing. And with Friday the 13th, it inspired so many horror movies in other franchises. Is there any particular franchise that is being inspired by Friday the 13th that you can think of that is taking something from it?
I'm not the biggest fan of the series, but the Hatchet series was like very
Mm-hmm.
heavily Friday the 13th inspired.
Yes,
Kane
yeah, the hatchet,
Hodder even plays the killer in those.
definitely. Um, so like I said, there is 12 films in the franchise, and out of all of the films, which ones would you say is the most important films within the franchise? Because each one kind of is the continuation of Jason's story.
That's hard to say because this it's another unique thing I love about this franchise. Usually people would say that the first one is the most important or the best, but with Friday the 13th, that's not always the case. And if I had to put my finger on most important, well, part threes, which gave us the hockey mask, which is the main thing we think of when we think of
Yeah,
Jason.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I might have to say it would be part three.
Yeah, because that's kind of where he became an icon. Because the first film, if I remember correctly, it wasn't. I don't think Jason was the killer in the first one. I believe it was his mother,
Yeah,
which
he shows up in a dream at the end, or was it a dream?
yeah. So that is his mother who was featured in the very first film, And there's all like, there's all this talk about Jason or this accident that happened. And at the end of the movie, like you say, is it a dream or is it reality? Because he bursts out of the water and drags somebody below the lake. And then after that, he became a part of this franchise as an actual character. And like you say, the one thing that stands out with Jason is the fact he has the iconic hockey mask. And like you said, the third one's the one that brought that to the forefront, and basically, yeah, that's where he got his signature look. Um,
That was a happy accident
do you know
because they
any?
were wanting to do some lighting tests and they
Mm-hmm,
didn't want to get the actor in full makeup for the shoot,
mm-hmm,
but they still needed the basic hood and stuff on. And one of the makeup effects artists, they played hockey, and he was a goalie, and he happened to have a mask with him. So they put that on the character for the actor for the testing,
mm-hmm.
and it just looked so good they worked it into the movie.
Oh, well, sometimes things just happen naturally on set that you don't, you don't think are going to happen, but then it turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. So that's probably what's happened with in the case of Jason. It's like obviously everybody knows that Michael Myers, his iconic mask is based off a Star Trek William Shatner mask, which they just repainted and then it gave him his iconic look. Is there any other stories that you can think of that are interesting about the production of these films?
A little bit. Okay, I got one of the scene in Friday the 13th Part 4 where he kills the girl in the raft.
Yes.
It was really like cold that night, and the girl kept wanting to get warmed up, and the director was in a rush. And Ted White, who played Jason, he was getting sick of it, and he like told him, he goes, "You need to get that girl warmed up between takes." And the director's like, "We got to make the movie." And he said, "Well, you can't make the movie without me. If He's like, I'm old enough, I can retire. If you don't get her warmed up between takes, I'm walking off the set, I'm going to the airport, and I'm going home."
So Jason, Jason put his foot down literally and got shit done on the set.
But when
So
you hear him talk about it, the best way I can put it is he's like democratic about it, because he's not totally throwing the director under the bus. He says, "Don't get me wrong, I understand he was under a time crunch, but it was still wrong."
yeah, definitely. Well, obviously, any film that gets greenlit, everyone know it's like climbing a mountain to get a film greenlit, and we all know that there's production costs and all that, but there's also safety and all of that stuff that goes into the production of a film. And like you say, if this particular the actress was feeling, the cold, it costs nothing really to be able to, wait a couple of minutes till she warms up a bit. Because if she does it that way, she's going to end up being able to put on a better performance if she's looked after, which I think is basically what the actor who played Jason at that time was trying to say. If we look after our actors, look after our staff, we'll get the best out of them.
He was like a storied stuntman throughout his career. He was a stunt double for in Creature from the Black Lagoon, and he was a stunt double for John Wayne in Sands of Iwo Jima.
Oh, that's interesting.
But this one's funny. But when they were filming Friday the 13th Part 2, the scene where she's trying to trick Jason that she's his mother, the
Mm-hmm.
way they filmed it, they already had the part where the prop machete was in his shoulder, but they needed another shot of her hitting the pickaxe with the machete.
Yeah.
And she missed and accidentally like split his finger open. So he had to go to the emergency room, and he went to the emergency room with the prop machete still in his shoulder. And he said, like, everyone just had this stunned look in the emergency room, and he's like, "No, we're just filming a movie." He go, "I cut my finger on set," and they're like, "Well, you're gonna have to wait then."
He should have pretended that the machete was really might have got scenes fast. But I'll talk a little bit more about the franchise. So, prompted by the success of John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, director Cunningham put on an advertisement to sell the film in Verity in early 1979, while Miller was still drafting the screenplay after casting the film in New York City. Filming took place in New Jersey in the summer of 1979 on an estimated budget of $550,000. A bidding war ensued over the finished film, ending with Paramount Pictures acquiring the film for domestic distribution, while Warner Brothers secured international distribution rights. And this is for the very first Friday the 13th. And it was released on May the 9th, 1980. Friday the 13th was a major box office success, grossing $59.8 million worldwide. Critical response was divided, with some praising the film's cinematography and score, while numerous others derided it for depictions of graphic violence. Aside from being the first independent film of its kind to secure distribution in the US by a major studio, its box office success led to a long series of sequels, a crossover with A Nightmare on Elm Street and a 2009 series reboot. A direct sequel, Friday the 13th Part 2, was released 1 year later. So it's a huge accomplishment for the budget it was on, for what it made financially.
Yeah, it's like sometimes like a small budget and a lot of creativity is going to do you a lot better than a huge budget.
Definitely. And like I mentioned there, it was praised for its iconic score. And everybody, every film has a signature, whether it's the villain itself, like Jason. This is the version of him from the Nightmare on Elm Street spin-off, the Freddy versus Jason. But that's his iconic look. He's kind of beefed up a bit in that film. But the other thing that I always loved about these films that stood out, not just the set, not just his iconic look, but that iconic sound, like the score, like his theme. I always found that really generally creepy. As soon as you hear it, shit's gonna go down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got some fond memories of this franchise. Is there anything that you would like to talk about pertaining to Friday the 13th?
Also, just fun growing up, like watching these when I shouldn't, and when I got older, my mom would rent them for me from the video store. I remember one year, and it was on Halloween night, and I don't know why they did a Friday the 13th marathon on Halloween night, but TNT's Monster Vision,
Mm-hmm.
they did it all night Friday the 13th marathon. They didn't and couldn't show part four for some reason, but they showed one, two, three, five, and six, and I stayed up all night watching them.
Yeah, but you would never have thought way back when the first one come out, that it would spawn this a huge franchise. There's been some really interesting kills as well throughout the series. I think my favourite kill, I don't know if it was the first one, where he's lying in bed and he has the screwdriver that goes through his throat.
Oh, Kevin Bacon with the
It
arrow.
gets, yes, it gets. How they did the effect work for that for its time in the 1970s was outstanding.
Funny
Um,
that Kevin Bacon, he got to the point where he refuses to sign autographs of that picture. 'Cause it never bothered him, but he said after years of signing autographs of the picture with the arrow through his neck, it's just gotten to him and he can't do it anymore.
yeah. So, is there any other iconic kills within the franchise that you enjoyed?
But my personal favorite, and it's just because it's one of the ones that your imagination does the work. It's in part four when one of the twins goes to go home, and we see her silhouette through a flash of lightning, and she just gets impaled by Jason. That one just always sticks out with me because it both does and doesn't show you what happened, and you have to fill in the blanks yourself.
Yeah, it's a kill where you have to use your imagination. And that's one thing. There's so many iconic characters like we spoke about, but there's also so many iconic kills within the franchise, and you've mentioned that one. Um, my Probably my favorite film out of the original 12 movies was Jason Takes Manhattan. I really enjoy that film. I don't know why, because you're taking Jason away from his familiar surroundings and you're taking him to the big city, and I just like how it was so different to the others. And it was nice to see them try to do something different. I don't think it succeeded in the way I think they had hoped, but I personally enjoyed that one. Out of all of the movies that have come and gone, from the very first up to the obviously the reboot, do you have a favourite film in the franchise?
Ugh, that would be a tie between part four and six, but for some reason, part two is the one I watched the most.
Yeah, definitely. What's your take on the reboots?
It's a mix. It had things I liked. It had a lot I didn't like. I thought the Derek Mears who played Jason did a phenomenal job, and he really deserves to play the character again. He was kind of like a cross between if you took the best of Ted White's Jason and the best of Kane Hodder's Jason,
Yeah,
that's what you got out of Derek Mears.
yeah. Kane Hodder's probably my favourite because I absolutely loved him in Freddy versus Jason. It was like Jason on steroids
That
because
was
he was.
Ken Kersinger.
Oh, was that Ken Kirshner? Right.
Yeah, like if you look at the behind the scenes for that, getting rid of Kane was controversial, but the producers say the director wanted a new Jason. The directors say the producer wanted a new Jason. So you can help neither side wants to take blame for recasting him, even though I don't like what they did with Jason in that movie, but Ken Kersinger did a great job doing what they wanted.
Yeah,
But what it was, Kane was the type he would actually stand up, look the director in the eye, and said, "No, Jason wouldn't do that." And I think a lot of the stuff in the script, Kane would have just they knew Kane would have just refused to do, so they just decided recast him.
yeah. Um, you said it all. You said it right at the beginning when you talked about Jason and how he's more of a sympathetic villain rather than an all-out just psychopathic maniac like Michael Myers. And that's what I always found with the Jason character. It's something I personally enjoyed as well, and something that I personally connected with. Like he was, bullied because of how he was bullied, and he had an overbearing, overprotective mother, and you know there was a lot to sympathise with him, and even when they did uh, Freddy versus Jason, they kind of thoroughly made Freddy Krueger the ultimate villain in that, and they kind of you made Jason once again a sympathetic character who was also being manipulated by Freddy, which I thought was fantastic. Um, what's your take on Freddy versus Jason?
It's flawed, but I have a lot of fun with it. Like, I was actually in the theaters on opening day for that movie, and like, you want to talk about just like a wild, energetic crowd that was along for the ride.
Mm, yeah,
I
definitely. Like,
do think the fight, especially the fight at the end, was great. But like, to me, it's a weird mask because from certain angles, I think it looks great. But from other angles, like that clip you showed where he's standing in the rain from that angle, it looks a little off to me.
yeah,
With the
his head looks a lot smaller than his body in this image.
it's not a bad mask, but it looks weird from certain angles.
Definitely. Well, speaking of the reboot, like I say, they cancelled the sequel, and it didn't. It wasn't class. I don't think it was classed as a flop. It cost 19 million to make. This is the Friday the 13th reboot, and it made 92.7 million at the box office. So for 19 million to 92 million, that's for me is quite a reasonable profit for a horror franchise of this kind.
They were just
So,
wanting a lot more out of it.
yeah, I think obviously it might be considered a flop compared to the success of Freddy versus Jason, which let's have a look at that. So, Freddy versus Jason cost 30 million to make, and it made a grand total of 116.6 million. So there's a huge jump in profitability there. But you need to remember it's similar to see the Monsterverse right now. They're on a high because they're basically riding the coattails of these two iconic characters, Godzilla and Kong, and they're gonna continue probably cashing in on the joint franchise, and to have two iconic characters like this, Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, clashing for the very first time, it's understandable why people would rush to theatres. And I even generally believe non-horror fans or fans of horror but who aren't particularly a fan of these two characters would have shelled out the money to go see them face each other on the screen.
I think that's why at times it had a little more of an action movie feel to it.
Yeah, it didn't feel like with the Freddy's franchise and the Jason, the Friday the 13th franchise and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. They do have this low budget slash independent feel to them, where like you see because of I think it was made by New Line, who made Jason versus Freddy, but I think it just felt like it didn't. It felt more mainstream. It didn't look like independent looking. It looked like a much more wider, and it had a bigger feel to it than it did
Yeah,
the original
too much
films.
polish.
Yeah, too much polish. Yeah. So obviously, out if we take away Jason, if we take away him from the franchise, is there another particular character throughout all of the movies that was your favourite away from Jason Voorhees? Like any of the survivors, the final girl.
Well,
Do you have a favourite final girl in the franchise?
probably Jenny from part two because of how smart she was.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you're more diverse in the franchise than I am. Like, there's a lot of lore to talk about when it comes to Jason. So, do you want to do a quick, lore synopsis on Jason and his background with his mother and so forth?
It's pretty basic, and like a lot of the origins will come from just campfire stories that would have been told up and down the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But Jason was just a boy who drowned, and his mother took revenge and started killing people. She got killed, and as they said, the legend has it Jason saw his mother decapitated that night, and he took his revenge, and it's a revenge he'll continue to take on anyone that enters his wilderness, and that's just his motivation. If you enter my backyard, you're dead.
Mm. Yeah. So the franchise Friday the 13th, it started out as your basic slasher franchise like Halloween. Like, they kind of hinted in the later sequels with Halloween and Michael Myers that he was like he was pure evil. He was like the definitive, evil, and there was like hints of like demonicness there, and like the cult and all that you see. I think in one of the later sequels with
Part
Jason, it
six.
went, yeah, part six. With the sequels to Friday the 13th, it went from being your basic slasher to something else, like more like supernatural, if you will. Like even like when I don't know which sequel it is where he was tied and he was drowned and he's all trained. You've seen it in the intro there where Jason's underwater and he's all trained. And I think he gets struck by lightning or something and he's suddenly revived from the dead.
It was
So,
part six was where he got struck by lightning and chained up at the bottom of the lake.
yeah, so what's your take on it going from like your basic, slasher film or franchise to now more down the supernatural route?
To me, though, those supernatural aspects were always there because like he took things in each movie that would kill anyone, even the machete to the shoulder a normal man would have bled out, the
Mm-hmm.
axe to the head would have killed a normal man, but he just kept coming back. I just think like to me it was more the supernatural is more subtly there, but in part six when Tommy, who's my favorite human character, dug him up and he got struck by lightning, it
Mm-hmm.
became supercharged. That's when the supernatural aspects just
Yeah.
they just went all the way with it.
Mm. Like, you know better than me because you know the franchise better than me. Has it ever been explained or was there ever hinted how the supernatural elements happen? Like for example, it's based on Camp Crystal Lake. So, for example, was it ever like said or where the Camp Crystal Lake is was like a witch's old burial ground? Anything of that nature?
Nothing like that. There's now in Jason Goes to Hell, and this legally isn't canon because of rights issues, but the director Adam Marcus, he got permission to borrow the Necronomicon prop from Sam Raimi, and it's in a shot in the film, and it's meant to be implied that's what happened with Jason. But it's like when I watch, like even when I watch Evil Dead and see how the Deadites behave versus Jason, I'm like, that just doesn't fit.
Yeah. Like, and it's not just that, even if somehow that was connected to Evil Dead, how you seen the Deadites like interact and how they act within that world. Jason doesn't act anything like a Deadite,
Yeah,
or what you could see a Deadite hybrid.
the
He would,
Deadites like to mess with their victims' heads.
yeah, where with Jason, even though he kind of comes across supernatural, he basically he acts like your everyday serial killer. He has a mission. You've invaded Crystal Lake. You're on his land. Anyone that goes there, you're on his territory, and he wipes you out. And that's what I liked about it. It was like basically, it's in a way, it's like it's his territory. It's like a predator, an apex predator on Crystal Lake's his domain, and he'll do anything to protect it at all costs. And that's what I loved about Friday the 13th, how it starts off as very serious, with a serious kind of story with the bullying and the mother wanting revenge, and then Jason now, like you say, potentially witnessed his mother be executed, and now he is decided, while he's still there, Camp Crystal Lake, he's going to protect it at all costs, and the legend was born. And now it goes more down the supernatural route till we do get to Jason Goes to Hell, which I always found that really bizarre, where he's in the mortuary and is it the mortician, he eats Jason's heart and he
Yeah.
gets possessed. I found that really bizarre, but it was fun. It was fun. And then it kind of was hinting, and then I think the biggest shock was at the end when you see the mask and Freddy Krueger's hand comes up and pulls it down.
You know who did the part of Freddy grabbing the mask, don't you?
Was it Robert Englund?
That was Kane Hodder.
Kane Hodder.
Yeah, he put on the sweater and the glove, and he was the one that reached out and grabbed the mask. So technically, Kane did play Freddy once.
I was literally going to say, technically he's played two horror icons. He's played Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, and then of course, well, a few years later, I think it was meant to come a lot sooner than it did, but it took a while. But we eventually did get the Versus film.
Well, it's one of those weird things. Even though both were with New Line at the time, they were owned by different producers, so you still have to get those producers to be able to come to terms, even if they're still under the same studio.
Yeah. So the film franchise, I'm assuming eventually they're doing I haven't seen it. Have they actually released any trailers for the new Crystal Lake TV show yet?
I'm not. They haven't. I'm not even sure what the last update I heard was.
Because that seems to be the go-to thing now. If they don't do a continuation via like film format, the go-to now, because they do have the technology, they do have the budget, they do have, it won't be, I would imagine it's not going to be CGI heavy, but they do have the ability to do television shows now, and we've seen them do it with another iconic horror franchise, which is Child's Play. We've done it, we've got the Chucky series, so we've seen that they can do it, and they're on to the third season. So what's your thought from Friday the 13th going from film to television?
I just hope they don't mess it up.
Yes, so let's see if I can find out anything about the actual television show, because
And look, there is a teaser image that shows Jason as a boy in the water, and that has me nervous. I don't want to know anything about Jason's childhood.
yeah,
What little
well,
we know is all I need to know. Don't demystify that.
well, here we go. Let's have a look. So the television series prequel. On October the 31st, 2022, a Friday the 13th prequel series was announced, titled Crystal Lake. It will be written and executive produced by Brian Fuller and Victor Miller, along with executive producers Mark Tobaroff and Rob Barasiaman. A24 will serve as the studio behind the series and will air on Peacock. So, in January 2023, Adrienne King was cast in a recurring undisclosed role. She previously portrayed Alice Hardy in the 1980 original film. Writing for the series was slated to begin in late January 2023, with Kevin Williamson writing one episode for season 1. So it's quite interesting that they brought Adrian King back, who starred in the original.
I hope they do what I'm thinking they're doing with her.
Well, in my imagination, just with her being younger in the original, I think she's going to be playing Jason's mother.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
And I've just had a look at a picture of her, and when I look at the picture of her, she actually does remind me of the actress that played the mother in the original film.
Yeah, bet. Yeah, she kind of does.
She does.
You're
So
talking about
that
Betsy
would
Palmer,
that would make perfect sense if she's playing the mother. So
but
it's
Betsy,
interesting. And a lot of these sequels or prequels or reboots, they do seem to be bringing back original cast members, especially in the world of horror. Obviously, we just had The Exorcist, The Believer, which brought back the original star. And apparently, the second one, whether it's still going ahead, because I heard The Exorcist Believer was a disaster. I know the girl, the who played the girl in Linda Blair. Is it Linda Blair? Who played the girl in
Linda Blair was the one that was possessed.
yeah, she played Reagan, and then obviously the first film played had the first of the new reboot brought back the she's in her 80s who played the mother, and apparently the Exorcist Deceiver was going to focus on the Linda Blair character and bringing her back. But whether that's still going ahead, I do not know. But it's interesting how a lot of these franchises are bringing back a star from the original movies. Like I say, Adrian King was in the first one. Um, Outside of the film franchise and now the television franchise, there's been there's been a mixture of comic books, which we do know they did a Evil Dead connection, Friday the 13th kind of mashup. Have you read any of the books, any of the comic series?
The comics I unfortunately have not, but there's a YouTube channel, and you should look him up, 80 Slasher Librarian, and he has a huge horror novel collection, and he reads them for his channel. And
Oh,
he's
that.
done a bunch of the Friday the 13th novels.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sounds. I'll check him up. If I can get a link to his channel, I'll put it in the description after
Here,
we're
I'll
done
send
here.
you one after the recording.
Spot on. So it's got six of the 12 films have been adapted into novels. Friday the 13th, 1 to 3, Jason Lives, Jason X, and Freddy vs. Jason, with Friday the 13th, Part 3 being adapted twice. The first novel was Michael Avalon's 1982 adaptation of Friday the 13th, Part 3, and Avalon has previously adapted Beneath the Planet of the Apes and Shock Corridor. The author chose to use an alternative ending, one that was filmed for Part 3 but never used.
That would be the one where he killed the girl at the end.
Oh, cool.
Because originally he was supposed to cut the girl's head off with the machete, but I think like they were never happy with how the effect looked, and they weren't too happy with the look of Jason's makeup at the time, so they refilmed it.
Definitely. Well, like I say, Manhattan. If Manhattan is my particular favorite, then Jason, the one that then Freddy versus Jason. I love the first one. The second one's great. The fourth one's great. But we'll go from being serious slasher to supernatural to then taking Jason to outer space in Jason X. What is your opinion of taking him to outer space in Jason X?
Eh, I've got kind of a love hate relationship with that movie. I think the premise is stupid. It's got some of the stupidest characters in the series, despite the fact that they're space sparing. But much like with Jason Takes Manhattan, I do love the idea of putting Jason in a more claustrophobic setting.
Yeah, I
Like,
think that's why I like Jason Takes Manhattan, because, like I say, they took him out of his comfort zone, away from the great outdoors at Camp Crystal Lake, took him to, like, a concrete jungle, a big city, and he's like he's having to adapt to this new environment he's never been put in.
and like when you're on a ship, like there really aren't many places you can run and hide.
Definitely. So we've talked about Jason as a whole. We've talked about the basic concept, all of the films. Now I'm just having a quick look at. Also, I just want to mention, because the series is being produced by A24, I do quite like a lot of their horror, like, films that they bring out. They're all very kind of grounded and very gritty company, and they're a very, independent company in the feel and the look of their movies. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it's in safe hands. I'd rather it be taken over by A24 than Blumhouse, between
I
you and me.
It's like I'm not an A24 fan, but if I had to choose between A24 or Blumhouse, I'll take A24 any
Definitely.
day. 'Cause at least they're good for letting just staying out of the filmmaker's way.
Definitely. They give complete creative control, and they basically allow the filmmakers to bring their ideas as they're intended to the
Yeah,
screen. That's what I enjoy about them.
from what I've said,
Um,
there are like certain conditions for that creative control. Like you typically have to have one big name actor attached, or you have to meet this or that. But if you meet those conditions, they just tend to stay out of the way.
Definitely. Um, like, when I think of Blumhouse, I just call them the Disney of horror. Like, Disney's took over everything. They're like the Skynet of the freaking entertainment industry. They're just taking over everything. And I just feel with Blumhouse, when they first started, they were nitty, they were gritty, they had really great movies. But then once they got so to a certain size and popularity, and they became like the go-to for horror, I think the ego and who and what brought them to the world in terms of filmmaking, they kind of put that to a side, and it became all about trying to, like, shock value and profit over than creativeness. And
Or
I think the last few outings, I think, was it Night Swim, was absolutely shit. I seen that. Luckily, I didn't see it in theaters. I went to a friend, and they rented it on streaming, and I was bored throughout that film.
yeah,
Uh,
and I've heard about it, and like I looked up the images of the monster, and I'm like, is this the best you can do?
It's the same with Imaginary, apparently, that's come out. That's having same issues. Everything's CGI as well. Like, I think The Nun, for example, the Conjuring series in The Nun, like Jason, he's become an icon. He's an icon within the world of horror. The concept and the idea of The Nun I really enjoy. It's the fact that whenever she's on screen and they do the big out there shots with the character, it's riddled with badly shot CGI, and it takes away the value, I think, of what the character could be. They could make a larger than life, just let her be makeup and attack people. And why is everything CGI? Because I know it's cheaper than practical effects, but it takes, for me, the believability away from horror. It's like if they start doing Friday the 13th and they just made shots of Jason, certain shots, all CGI, it would take the believable factor away. It's
It's
like,
like use CGI to complement the practical effects.
definitely.
Like even though it's not a good movie, a great example of how I like them working together is Alien versus Predator, where you would have a practical guy in a suit, but when the tail's moving around really fast and violently, you would have a CG tail. When they
Yeah,
work together, they cover each other's shortcomings up.
definitely. So we've talked about the films. We've talked how much the films have made. We've talked about the upcoming television series. Now we're going to talk about the comic series. Obviously they've turned a lot of the films into novels, but what I really enjoyed is I really enjoyed how they did a number of versus comics, like they did Friday the 13th versus Leatherface, Jason basically versus Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which for me is one of my other favourite franchise. He's another horror icon. Have you ever read the comic books?
No, but I watched like a full detailed synopsis on YouTube. I thought
Definitely.
like it had some interesting things going for it, and I like how they dealt with Jason having flashback, even though I don't think his childhood should be explained when it's in a hypothetical non-canon scenario like this in a comic book. I don't mind it, but I like how
Yeah,
the way, like Leatherface was being treated. It was like a flashbacks to his childhood, and that set him off.
yeah. I think out of all of the iconic um comics, I think my favourite. Yeah, they did do a Freddy versus Jason comic. Then they did Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. And I think, if anything, I think that's the one thing they would have loved to have been turned into the movie. If they were going to do a direct sequel to Freddy versus Jason, and it obviously is more goes down the supernatural route, I think bringing in Ash and the Evil Dead would have been the way to go. What's your opinion of that?
Definitely. Could you just imagine the conversation between Freddy and Ash and what that would have been like?
It would have been hilarious. It would
But
be golden.
for
It
me,
would be
if I was
gold.
the director, I would have just given both Robert and Bruce a outline of what they're going to be talking about, and I would have just we're not even going to script it. You two just ad lib it.
Definitely. And I could see that working 100%. And, it could have happened, but for whatever reason, even after the end of Freddy versus Jason, they made the choice to just not continue doing versus films with these characters for whatever reason. Do you know any reason why they didn't bother continuing after doing,
I
after
heard something about why, but it's been so long I can't remember.
I heard a really funny rumor, and I would have loved this to happen as well. Is they were going to try, because New Line had the rights to Freddy and Jason at that time, but I think they were trying to get the rights to other horror characters to do other versus films. Now, one of the ideas I would have loved, well, there were two ideas, and I generally would have enjoyed them, and I think it would have been interesting to see how they did these ideas. The first one was, and they had, I think, written a story outline, and were working on a script, and it was actually called Child's Play on Elm Street. Did you ever hear that?
No.
Yeah, so it would have been Chucky versus Freddy. And another idea I heard was they were going to try, and I don't know how they would have done this, they were going to do Michael Myers versus Pinhead. So it would have been, so it would have, and apparently the end fight, which had been kind of put out there, is where obviously the box that they come out of, the Hellraisers, Michael Myers would have actually walked through there in the box, like the god that's above, that giant god. He
Leviathan.
actually, the Leviathan actually wants to choose Michael Myers as his new emissary or whatever, because he's pure evil and Pinhead isn't. Pinhead for me was selfish. He's not like, but deep down he's not pure evil. He's just a selfish human being who made really daft, dark choices.
You know about the like when they were writing Freddy versus Jason, like they wrote a bunch of endings. You know about the one you they wrote for a joke, don't you?
No, fill it
It would
in.
have continued. Freddy would have been back in hell and he would have put his glove on and smiled, and he would have turned around to his shock to see Jason charging him. And right as they're about to fight again, these chains with hooks grab them and pull them apart. And Pinhead appears and goes, "Gentlemen, what seems to be the problem?"
I think that would have been an amazing ending, but only if they got Doug Bradley to play Pinhead. It's like, Jason. There's so many actors who've played him. I said my favourite was Kane, and he for me is the ultimate Jason. And then obviously no one I don't think would ever be able to play Robert Englund, and Doug Bradley for me is the icon
The
Pinhead.
Even though it was a terrible movie in Judgment, I think if you were going to replace Doug Bradley with any actor, the guy from Judgment was as good as you can get.
Yeah, because they did do. I haven't actually seen that Hellraiser where it was. They did a new Hellraiser and Doug Bradley wasn't cast as Pinhead. And that's the one I haven't seen. The one where Pinhead is played by a different actor.
I've heard mixed things about it.
I haven't seen it. I did watch the brand new movie, the new Hellraiser, where obviously Pinhead was female, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was not as good as the originals, but I did like some of the concepts in there. I like some of the kills in there. I like some of, especially. Have you seen the new one?
Nah, not.
Well,
It's
there's a
Hellraiser. It's weird. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the movies, but I'm more interested in the lore. So I wasn't going to be too interested either way.
yeah. So the new film, right at the end, there's one of the main human villains who's throughout the film. He obviously wants perfection. He believes and wants to be, wants perfection, and he looks at it. So he makes a deal with Pinhead, and at the end, and sorry, this is spoilers for anybody, but and this is an iconic at the end where she basically turns him into a Cenobite at the end, and how it's done is very graphic. He gets all his skin ripped from him. So they did have some really good visuals, and I did like some of the designs of the Cenobite. Having the female Pinhead was different, a different take. I didn't mind. She did a decent job for what she had to work with. But I'll always look at Doug Bradley as Pinhead. That might be biased, but it's like anything. It's like you can only ever see Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. You
Or
wouldn't ever want to replace him.
like remaking Phantasm and having someone other than Angus Scrimm do the tall man.
Definitely. Well, you do realise it'll just be a matter of time before they reboot that. We're in the era of reboots. Like you've seen the big debate online at the minute with the Crow reboot. Some people are just straight against it. Some people are 50-50, or some people are digging it and are willing to give it a chance. I'm somewhere in the middle. I see promise in it, but I also see things that I'm worried about. But the only way I'll know is if I watch it in theatres or on streaming. I haven't decided if I'll go see it in theatres or watch it on streaming. But anyway, let's progress with Friday the 13th. So as you know, they've got comics, they've got the films, they've got the television series, but because it has such a huge, strong fan base, and it is like an iconic horror franchise, there's a lot of really talented independent filmmakers that come up with amazing ideas, amazing stories, and there's been a lot of Kickstarter projects out there for independent continuations or retellings of the story, and I know you've backed a couple of them. So
Hmm.
would you like to take the lead here and tell her about the iconic um, Friday the 13th independent fan films?
Well, the first one I seen was Never Hike Alone, and it was a short film that was really good. You can tell the people that made it were passionate about the franchise. And at the end, we see Tommy Jarvis, and it was like just when you realize it was him, it was this huge pop. So when they did like the prequel, Never Hike in the Snow, I backed it on Kickstarter and or Indiegogo, one of them, but like a lot of this one got more of a mixed reaction,
Mm-hmm.
but I enjoyed it because it was just a backstory setting the stage for what would be the next film, Never Hike Alone 2, which I also backed.
So there's Never Hike Alone. When did that come out?
I think probably 2006. Oh, let me look that up because
So
I can't
these,
remember.
and are all of these being created and put together by the same team?
The Never Hike Alone movies were all done by Womp Stomp Films.
Right. So
Never
there's
Hike
never
Alone was 2017.
right. So there's Never Hike Alone, then there's Never Hike Alone in the Snow, then Never Hike Alone 2.
Yeah.
And is it all one continuous story with Jason Voorhees?
Yeah, this story, it's a short one. It's about a guy who gets killed by Jason in the snow. And you see the like sheriffs covering it up. Tommy's trying to expose the truth. Never Hike Alone follows this YouTuber who does like camping and hiking vlogs in his encounter with Jason. And then Never Hike Alone 2, the beginning parts of it take place during the events of Never Hike Alone, but it combines the story. Tommy, the mother of the victim from Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow, and the hiker from Never Hike Alone all come together to take on Jason.
So you could class these short independent fan films as side sequels to the main story arc throughout the main films,
And
which
like some of them, like Roseblood here, it's a direct sequel to Part 7.
also and that came out after the Hike Alone trilogy.
Yeah, but it's no, it came out in between, but it's unrelated.
All right.
This was done by Peter Anthony, who plays one of
And
the villains in the film.
very interesting.
And it's basically
So
it's a continuation of Tina from Part 7 story.
interesting. See, this is why I wanted you on the channel, because I know you know your stuff when it comes to Jason
Like what I
and the
love,
Friday
like
the 13th
for
franchise.
me, this is like a very special, extremely special item in my collection because not only backing it did I get my name in the credits, but they have a documentary about the production and aftermath of the film. And there's a clip of my review on the special features.
Yeah, that's yeah. I knew you had mentioned that one of these fan films that you had back that you were actually a part of the making of section,
Yeah.
or
Uh,
in the special features. So that's a testament of if you being a fan of this franchise and how much you love the franchise and how much passion for it, it's paid off because you're now a part of a special feature in a fan film that millions of people around the world will discover and get to watch.
that's a friend of mine, and he's another YouTuber, Doomsday's Crypt. They premiered a special feature on YouTube before they sent out the Blu-ray. And he's like, go to their channel and watch the documentary. There's a clip of your review in it. And I'm like, wait, what now?
Well done. So all of these films, the Hike Alone, Don't Hike Alone, Are they available to buy on their website, or are they available to watch
They're like
online?
they're perks for backing the films.
So the
But like,
DVDs and sorry, the Blu, they're the perks for backing the movie. So you only select people who back the films will actually have them on Blu-ray.
legal. Hold on a second.
Yeah, so like I say, Anthony Jordan, he has his own YouTube channel, Anthony Jordan Movies and Gaming.
Sorry
So
about that. I had
please
to.
give him a follow. He's coming back to it. So anybody, sorry Anthony, who backed these in the Kickstarter campaigns or the crowdfunding, one of the perks was getting the actual Blu-ray as part of the perks.
Yeah, because it is a licensed franchise. Like they legally cannot sell copies of the films, but
Yes.
there is a loophole where you can produce copies, and if it's a reward for backing the film, you can.
You can give them, basically it's like you get it for free technically because of your backing the campaigns and the production of the fan films.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, it's a weird loophole, but I'm glad it's a loophole.
Yeah. So outside of yous having these Blu-rays, can you watch these online?
Yeah, they're all available on YouTube.
There we go. I'll try and get the links to these and link them all up in the subscription box below.
Okay.
Um, is there anything else you would like to mention about Friday the 13th that you think people should know about the franchise?
I'll bring up one from one of the books. Like in there is a reading of the book on the YouTube channel I mentioned, but if you watch the original film, how Steve comes across as kind of a creeper with Alice,
Yes.
in the book, it actually does explain their in a relationship that's failing.
Right, well, that makes sense.
So like
Yeah.
with in the book, he doesn't feel like he's as much of a creep with her as he does in the movie.
Yeah. So, yeah, that kind of brings a bit more to the lore of the book and the characters within the film. Um, but like I say, I'm a huge fan of Friday the 13th. Obviously Jason Voorhees he is an icon. Um, I've always enjoyed it. Let's see if I can look at a few quick facts, any more little bonus features before we end this. Um, so let's see. Actually, will it in other media? Here we go. So in other media, this is one thing we haven't mentioned is video games. So in May 1986, Dormark released Friday the 13th, a computer game. After that, it was attempted to pursue. 3 years later, LGN published a game for Nintendo Entertainment Systems. In 2007, Zendex released their own Friday the 13th game for mobile phones. In the game, the players plays as one of the counsellors at Camp Crystal Lake while the staff is preparing the camp for its first summer weekend. An unknown stalker begins murdering each of them. The player must discover the truth and escape the camp. Electronic Gaming Monthly announced in January 2015 that a new survival horror multi-platform game would be coming out called. The game was originally titled Slasher Volume 1 Summer Camp, in which it was originally developed by Ilphonic, but Gun Media joined and helped develop in when they were published the game. The game was raised through BackerKit and Kickstarter, with BackerKit collecting 271,000 and 16,000 backers from Kickstarter, and it was confirmed that the game would be Friday the 13th. A developer panel for Gun Media and Ilphonic was opened at PAX South 2016 in January with alpha footage and a list of kill animations, a mobile game available on iOS, Android, and Steam. Friday the 13th Killer Puzzle. And there was, I'm sure there was another Friday the 13th computer game. Have you had any of the games?
I've had the NES one, and the multiplayer one. I actually purchased it 3 times. I have it for Xbox. I have it on the Switch and on the PS4.
Yeah, and
But I got the
other
Switch and
games,
PS4
yeah,
versions because they came with posters.
all right. Um, are the games very loyal to the films and the franchise and the
Oh,
lore?
the NES one, it real pretty much is you're just counselor's side trying to survive Jason, and the other one, it's multiplayer. You're either counselors or Jason, and it uses the locations from the movies.
Yeah.
So, like, you could be running around the Part 2 campground.
Hasn't Jason? I know. I don't know if he has, but you know how they do like the bonus, the downloadable packs for the likes of say Mortal Kombat. Has Jason ever made an appearance in the Mortal Kombat
Mortal
games?
Kombat 10.
Yeah, I had a feeling, because I love the Mortal Kombat games. And so I remember I didn't play it when he was a part of the game, but I always knew he was, and I always regretted not playing the game with Jason. I would have loved to have seen his fatalities and being able to play him as part of the Mortal Kombat franchise.
You know who else was funnily enough in that game with him?
Was it Freddy?
Leatherface. Leatherface.
Leather, yeah, another, like I say, another icon. But yes, we've talked about Friday the 13th as a whole. Like I say, it's one of the Jason Voorhees is, and Friday the 13th is an horror icon and a horror icon franchise. And this has been a franchise discussion on Friday the 13th, just trying to pass out the knowledge of the franchise to people who may be interested in Friday the 13th, because obviously there's new generations of people out there who may have not have discovered this yet. So I hope you check out the video. I hope you've enjoyed what me and Anthony's been talking about and giving you just a little bit of an insight into the franchise as a whole. Is there anything you would like to talk about or add that you think's very important for the Friday the 13th franchise?
If you want to learn more about it, just look for the documentary Crystal Lake Memories. It's a,
Chris,
I mean, multi-hour documentary, but they spend a good long amount of time on each film, and you get like a lot of good production info, behind
yeah,
the scenes mishaps that may or may not have happened on the set, like the story I mentioned about Ted White threatening to go home, or the other actor with the injury on the set. I got those stories from that documentary.
very good. So there you go. More knowledge passed down by Anthony Jordan, who, like I say, he's a huge fan of this franchise. He also has his own YouTube channel. It is called Anthony Jordan Movies and Gaming. And is there anything coming up on your channel that you would like to bring up and mention for the viewers who
Um,
might what?
I'm currently re-reviewing all the Godzilla movies. Actually, I need to start getting my footage for King Kong versus Godzilla. I would have had that by now, but I'm kind of procrastinating because I want to time that release closer to Godzilla X Kong because it'll probably get more eyes on it. And starting in April, because it's been 20 years since I've watched Gundam Seed, It
Yes.
first premiered on Cartoon Network here in the States. I think it was April 15th. So I'm going to start watching it on April 15th, and I'm going to do a Gundam Seed 20 years later series, and I'm probably just going to watch 5 episode stretches and just talk about it.
That sounds brilliant. As for me, like Anthony knows, I am a huge kaiju fan myself. I don't know what gives it away. I don't know that. Sorry, that in the background gives it away. But I'm a huge Godzilla fan, kaiju fan. I do have my own kaiju connection segment, and I will be doing a review for Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. And I'm thinking of doing a few more interviews called Love of Kaiju. It might be something I bring where I bring on an individual and talk about how they discovered kaiju, their favourite parts of the kaiju genre, and their favourite films within the genre. Coming up on this channel this week, I also have a review coming with DJ Anubis from the Metal Tavern Radio. We will be reviewing at some point this week the new Netflix films with Millie Bobby Brown, Damsel. Over on his channel, this we will be doing our next entry in the cinematic synergy, and we will be reviewing a film that I chose called Kill Command. And that came out in 2016, I believe, and it's quite a good sci-fi film. And what inspired me to make that my next suggestion was I did my top 10 current favourite sci-fi films, part of my top 10 segment. And he was a part of that as well, so you can check that out on the channel. Speaking of my top 10s, I'm going to be doing my top 10 favorite disaster films is the next my top 10. That's coming. And
That should be
last,
fun.
yes, that's coming sometime this week. And later on at the end of the week, because it is the release of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I will be doing a review for that as well, coming to the entertainment headquarters. But
Hopefully,
it's
that movie will be good.
Yes, well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the last one. For me, it was similar to, I guess, Wakanda Forever, the Black Panther, how it was a tribute to, the star of the previous film who sadly passed away, and it was dealing with grief and all that. When it come to Ghostbusters, the Ghostbusters Afterlife, it was basically a tribute to Harold Ramis, who played Egon, and the director. And I thought they did a very loyal, very, great job of doing that. So hopefully the next one will continue going down that road.
Have you
But
have you ever played the game?
the Ghostbusters game,
Yeah, the one where they all return the voice to characters.
no, I don't really. I don't have a console. I don't have any gaming console. The last gaming console I had was the PlayStation 3 many, many years ago.
Well,
So I
it
just
was a
haven't.
lot of fun, and it was like great having them all back. But like Bill Murray stuff does feel very phoned in.
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to see if it's all phoned in the new film when I do a review for it.
Hopefully not.
But hopefully not, absolutely. But this has been a Into the Darkness segment. It's been dedicated to Friday the 13th. It's been fantastic having Anthony on the channel. Thanks for doing this with us and giving us some little bits of knowledge there on the franchise.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime, you're welcome on the channel, anytime. And like I say, I will, because this is me Into the Darkness segment and it is dedicated to all things horror, I will be doing some more Into the Darkness franchise horror discussions, and I think the next one will be with DJ Anubis, and it's going to be on the Evil Dead. So that'll be coming when we schedule it on the channel as well.
You ever
But,
do any Universal monsters? I want to be a part of that one.
well, I'm going to do the big slasher and, franchises first. I've done Friday the 13th. I'm gonna do Michael Myers and then Freddy Leatherface. Once I get the big, the slasher icons out the way, I intend to go old school, and I do think I'm gonna make the month of October Universal Monsters month. So I'm going to dedicate the month of October to Universal Monsters, and I'll definitely have you on, and we'll do the creature from the Black Lagoon, because I know that's one of your favourites.
There's that October. I actually got on my computer. I need to finish it, but I got a short horror story I'm working on, and I want to premiere that on my channel in October. I got another friend, Lethal, one that has a channel, and he's worked with me before, and he has a good voice, so I kind of want to drop it on him. Like, would you be interested in reading this and recording it, and we premiere it on both our channels?
It's something we can definitely look into. Well, absolutely, it sounds a lot of fun.
Because it would be like fun. Like, October's huge for my channel, so it'd be nice to just
Yeah,
premiere something that's like exclusively mine.
yeah, definitely. So every month, every October, I want to do something horror based. So last year, I actually premiered the channel in October. So I did a lot around Bram Stoker's Dracula for my channel, because I dedicated the month of October to Bram Stoker's Dracula. I actually visited Whitby, where the book was inspired from, and I actually did a Whitby blog. If people want to check that out, that's in the personal blog section on the playlist here on the entertainment headquarters. I did a Bram Stoker's Dracula museum tour, and I also went to the Bram Stoker's Dracula experience, so you can check that out. And of course, I did my first ever live, and it was with our other good friends, Sci-Fi Century, and of course Mr. Jedi Granval, and we actually did a Bram Stoker's Dracula film review, the Francis Ford Coppola one. So definitely coming this October will be Universal Monsters. But like I say, once again, Anthony Jordan, thanks for joining us. Thanks for talking Friday the 13th. And everybody, please like, share, and subscribe to his channel, Anthony Jordan Movies and Gaming. And this has been Into the Darkness. And me and Anthony will catch you at the next one.